Hey, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to share with you a little bit about the yamas and the niyamas, considered ethical principles to live by. Um, I find it so interesting, when people say to me, well, I know yoga is supposed to be good for you, I should probably do it, but gosh, I'm not flexible enough, or I don't have time to get to a yoga studio or to roll out my yoga mat or whatever. And so I always find it really exciting at that point to be able to say, hey, that's not actually the center of what yoga is about. Sure, we may do those things as we practice yoga. But at the very root of yoga are these yogic principles that we can, of course, take with us into life off of the yoga mat. That's really where they tend to play out the most. But also breathing, breath work, pranayama. So if you are, in fact, seeking kind of some new amp up, I guess, to feeling your best self, to evolving into the best version of yourself, I'm hoping that you will find breath work useful and, of course, this focus on the yamas and the niyamas. Again, kind of ethical principles to live by. The yamas expressly are things not to do, and the niyamas are things that you should or could do that would create a better life. And I find that through different portions of my life, these might feel more poignant than others. One might call to me. So I actually made them into like a little deck of cards. There's 10 of them total, five yamas and five niyamas. And I created a little deck of cards. On the front of each card is the Sanskrit, and then on the back of each card is the pairing of the English translation. Um, so I'm going to talk about them in the way that makes sense to me and also invite you to notice which ones call to you or which ones call to you right now. What really would be a great place to put your focus? And you might pick like just one, say, per week to practice giving your attention to. I like starting with Swadyaya, that first card I flashed to you, which is self-observation, because I feel like this is the beginning of a reflective and thoughtful life. It's the beginning of the opportunity to create change of all kinds. So, for example, in a physical yoga practice, I'm often inviting us to notice, is right side different from the left? Uh, wow, my right hip is tight. What's going on there? And I like to say that noticing precedes change. And in fact, kind of guarantees change, that the act of noticing puts us on a pathway where ultimately something will evolve. No, more shall be revealed. We'll learn more. We'll investigate more. And whatever it is that's out of balance or in disharmony has the chance to be evolved. So, self observation to me is really the root of practice in the deepest sense. Tapas, spelled like the Spanish small plate, represents resolve, or sometimes is called discipline or self-discipline. Um, this is what gets us to the yoga mat, if that's what we're wanting to do. It's what has us say, yeah, I know it's cold, or yeah, I know, I could just go home and eat popcorn, but I'm going to go to my yoga practice because I know that I feel better when I do. I know that it's a key part of being my best self. This can show up, of course, in so many ways in our life. But tapas, resolve, the ability to apply oneself, is, I think, a huge part of getting the benefit of whatever it is we're applying ourselves to. Next, I want to talk about ahimsa, nonviolence, non-harming. This is important because I think in the effort to do a thing, to have a goal, or to achieve a thing, it's very easy to push, to go too hard. And in the case of a yogic practice on the mat, we're always seeking our edge. And that's a place where there is intensity, but that we can soften it with our breath, that we can dissolve things that are hard and contracted. If we, out of just say boredom or a lack of kind of resolve and focus, we don't approach the edge, nothing changes. We kind of just stay where we are and everything's a little bit blah and ho hum. If we blast past our edge, it can absolutely physically injure us, or depending on what we're talking about, it can create a form of harm or violence against other aspects of the self, or of course, other people. So I'm always really interested in the subtle versions of non-harming. Most of us know you shouldn't run around hitting people. So this is a really fun place for self-reflection. Another example I would give would be overeating, that it literally can physically do harm actually to your digestive organs over time, creating micro tears and so on. But that I know when I eat too much, I feel just low energy. I feel uncomfortable. I can't breathe as deeply. So there's this like incredible rollout effect to me feeling not my best self. So subtle but powerful. Ahimsa, non-harming. Next, I'm going to go to asteya, which is non-stealing. And this, again, with each of these, we want to look at the subtle version, and you'll notice that there is some overlap as well. But non-stealing to me, I kind of get there by asking this. Is there anything that I am doing that is depleting my most vibrant version of myself, my life force? Is there a commitment I'm making to myself that then I break, a form of theft? Do I basically offer up my energy to other people because other people need me and oh gosh, they need help? Without, in fact, honoring or being in integrity with my commitments to self or my own basic needs. So there are a lot of ways that we might steal from ourselves and that we might notice and choose to reclaim that energy. It's kind of fun. Speaking of energy, brahmacharya, respect for energy. Now, historically or traditionally, for example, if you were in an ashram, this would translate to celibacy. And one might choose to think about brahmacharya and use it for inspiration for celibacy if that's something that you think would benefit you. But I find, again, this more interesting as I broaden my imagination of like, again, respecting energy, respecting my life force and those of others. How do I do harm to those energy resources? Um, for example, just say gossiping or talking badly about somebody might be do harm to that energy resource of someone else and actually of me as I'm thinking those negative thoughts, etc. It's going to affect my energy. Um, I like to ask the question with brahmacharya or kind of again energy management as I think of it. What is the one thing that, if I changed it, would have a positive impact upon my energy, my life force, my um, sense of joy and fulfillment? For me, for example, one thing is anything that disrupts my sleep is a detractor from my life force. So if it is drinking too much alcohol and getting that kind of sugar hit that comes at, say, 2 in the morning as my body's processing it, and then I'm awake and I can't really go back to sleep easily. So the sleep for me is kind of one of the end goals for being my best self. And there can be myriad things that disrupt that quality of sleep. And so I might begin looking at, well, what are those things? And what one change can I make, or multiple changes in protecting sleep could I make? Maybe it's getting some exercise or movement. Um, there are so many ways that we can change our lives, that we can set goals and so on. And I think it can be hard to choose. But if we ask ourselves, what is the biggest thing that I can do that will impact me? And we give our focus there, it will be much more powerful and more effective. We know that it's not wise to try and make changes on like 8 different places. We'd love to make one, give it our attention, and then see how, even that at the end of a week, we might be feeling about that shift. We also know that it takes multiple weeks, I think it's like 6 weeks, to ingrain a new pattern or habit. So we may have to give it our attention for quite a while. But I think a week is long enough to kind of try it on and kind of go, do I have my attention in the right place? Is this the right thing to be working on? The next is Satya, truth. And we're obviously interested in potentially not lying to other people, but telling the truth to ourselves, I think, is most important, and that's where, again, a quality life begins. Um, and that it's only from that place that we can actually choose to tell truth to other people, right? If we're lying to ourselves, we don't even know what's true, we're going to pass that along. I also want to go on record as saying that I think sometimes we don't owe other people the truth. In other words, not necessarily lying or choosing to deceive, but that it's not necessarily our responsibility to honestly reveal everything that might be in our heart and soul. And at times it might be, frankly, do harm to us to do so if we don't feel safe with these people or the way that they might use our information. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, that in the effort to be altruistic, that we don't somehow actually undo ourselves. Aparigraha is non-possessiveness. And um, this, of course, can be, not trying to gather all the worldly goods, not to be greedy, not to be selfish in that way. But there also are other subtle ways that we can release our kind of possession of things, like our what we're known for. Our I can't think of the word right now, but our reputation, if you will, and what people say about us. That if we are working too hard to have an identity. That's kind of what I was looking for, an identity out there. And our attention is about creating that. We might actually lose our authentic connection to what is our true identity. And so I think that releasing ultimately is a part of possessiveness, releasing our attachment to what people think of us and how we can manipulate their impression of us and so on. That's just one example, but I think you could have fun playing with this in a lot of ways. It's certainly a great principle from which to practice decluttering. Noticing that when we possess and hold, either out of fear of lack or, gosh, I spent money on it and I haven't even worn it yet, or, you know, trying to, again, keep up with the Joneses, to use a phrase, that generally we will actually deplete our life force. We'll be less happy, we'll have less abundance. So that act of aparigraha, of non-possessiveness, of giving away appropriately, can be incredibly powerful. And we would say that that receptive space actually allows the influx of that which is true abundance to come into your life. So decluttering is a really fun place to practice this aparigraha principle. Next, we have Shaucha, which essentially is purity. And yeah, I never know what to say about this one, other than, purity of thought. Again, this could connect with what I mentioned before about, noticing the harm that can come of our thoughts if we're directing them towards other people or against ourselves as well. I think negative self-talk is one of the most harmful things that we tend to practice as humans, and it really actively depletes the best version of ourselves coming to fruition. So for me, I think of it that way. Again, some people might think of it in more kind of other terms, and feel free to play with that. Ishvara Pranadhana, surrender to life. Surrender is so profound, and yet I think that a lot of us are naturally disinclined. I think maybe we're trained in our society that you've got to struggle and you've got to fight that thing, and in order to be successful, you've got to persevere, etc. And so there's maybe a deep inclination to not surrender, that maybe we don't see it as a powerful act. And yet we know that when we argue with what is, to loosely quote Byron Katie, who wrote Loving What Is, but when we argue with reality, that's when we experience suffering. And so when we can surrender, we can often find a peace, and perhaps get less harmed in the crazy act of the crazy river of life, right? If we can just go with the flow. There's a wonderful Hopi Indian saying about that as well, of kind of moving along the path of the river and just giving into the flow of it and not struggling. And if you just go with that flow and that current, it will carry you around the rocks and the trees and the brambles and things. And if you fight, that you'll often come to great harm. So there's a lot of fun ways to look at this. But I think that it takes a lot of practice and a bit of faith and trust. I have a phrase that really helps me do this when I notice myself kind of actively clinging to an idea or a fear, and I'm going, oh God, how am I going to solve this? And what's going to happen? And oh, I don't know what to do. What should I do about this? And of course, we want to do active problem solving, but the challenge I think often comes when we don't even really have enough information, that it isn't something that's actually resolvable. It's either something completely outside of our power or the information that we need to work with isn't there at the time. And I notice when I'm in that mode that my whole like body and being is just tightening up. It definitely steals any sense of joy or present momentness that I have. And so one of my favorite phrases that I use is more shall be revealed. I know some people will say, let it, give it up to God. There's other phrases that people have that has a similar effect. This idea that in this moment, everything is fine as it is, and there is nothing to act upon. So, however you find that, whatever words you find that help create that quieting of the striving and the struggling would be very, very powerful. That surrender to life, Ishvara Pranadana. And really exciting is that if we do these things, we then hopefully get to settle into Santosha. I'm trying to move the card here so you can see it. Contentment. Contentment. I invite you to tune in a moment to your body and breath and just try that word on, Santosha, contentment. And what I notice is that the word contentment itself is very settling. I breathe deeper. I'm more inclined to smile. It's very different than happiness. Happiness is more temporal. It's more easily relinquished because of some little thing that didn't go your way. Um, Contentment is more abiding. As a friend and yoga student of mine pointed out, you can actually feel sadness and contentment at the same time. I was like, yeah, that's right. um, Contentment is something that gets cultivated and then continues to just nourish and support us throughout the ups and the downs of life. And yoga, in all of its forms, physical practice on the mat, pranayama and breath work, um, reflection, and applying these principles of our yamas and niyamas in life off of the yoga mat can all help bring us to a place of santosha, contentment, right? So as an example, we might notice that when we are about to go somewhere, am I someone who always leaves a little late? I used to be. I'm getting so much better at it because I noticed, Swadyaya, that my act of doing that often cost me. It cost me certainly my peacefulness and my santosha, my contentment, because I was then striving and gripping the wheel and thinking about, how am I going to get there and who do I have to apologize to? What excuses am I going to make? I noticed one day when I was driving out the driveway and I passed my mom's house for the umpteenth time, she, came out and said something lovely like, "Hey, we'd love to invite you to dinner." And I was like, I'm running late. And I realized finally, after I don't know how much of this repetition, that my act of leaving late, of not keeping my commitment, my integrity with my word to be somewhere on a specific time, and then the striving and struggling was costing me so much of the richness of my relationship and the way that I wanted to relate to my mother, non-harming, kind, patient, the way that she does with me. So that's just like one example of how a little moment in time in life off the yoga mat can give an opportunity to play with the richness of the yamas and the niyamas. I hope you have fun with it. I hope you can feel at least one of these call to you as a place to start right now. And I look forward to hearing about it. Feel free to send me some comments. Be well. Have a great day. Namaste.